Baby, let me tell you something right now, life has a funny way of teaching you lessons you never went looking for. Sometimes the biggest revelation doesn't come from a sermon, a book, or some fancy life coach. Sometimes it comes from the people you raised, the same people you thought needed you. See, I walked into my house that day expecting the world to look the same as it always did. But what I witnessed in that living room pulled me right out of my body. It made me rethink motherhood, womanhood, and the legacy we pass on without even realizing it. So sit down, grab your tea, and listen close. Because this lesson, oh honey, it came wrapped in shock, wrapped in truth, and wrapped in the kind of wisdom only life can carve into you. Now let me give you the speech. When I pushed that front door open that afternoon, I expected nothing more than the quiet sigh of a home that had exhaled after a long day, yet what greeted me was something so unexpected that it felt like the entire world stopped breathing. I stepped inside and the air felt different, almost heavy, like it carried a message that had been waiting for me. I did not hear the usual shuffle of footsteps or the soft scratch of someone moving around. Instead, the house felt still in a way that pressed against my chest. That is when I saw her. My daughter on her knees with her back toward me, her hands cupping the hands of another girl whose shoulders trembled as if the weight of her life had finally broken open. I froze right there because the sight hit me in a place I did not know still held such tenderness and fear. There was something about the way my daughter leaned forward, not hurried, not uncertain, but steady, with a kind of grounded care I had only seen in women who had lived through storms and learned how to build shelter from the ruins. She spoke in a low voice, a soft, gentle stream that wrapped itself around that broken girl like a blanket made of warmth and truth. And though I could not yet hear every word, I could feel the intention behind them. She was not comforting her out of duty. She was guiding her out of love, strength, and a wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. I could not look away. It felt like watching a candle lit in a dark room after someone thought the flame had died for good. My mind ran in every direction, yet my feet stayed rooted to that spot. I remembered every moment I had doubted myself as a mother, every night I wondered if she had absorbed anything I tried to teach her, every time I worried that life would bruise her spirit before she learned how to guard it. But in that instant she was not a child trying to understand the world. She was a young woman offering the kind of presence that heals. My heart pulsed with confusion, awe, fear, pride, all tangled in a way that made my breath feel heavy. I wanted to step forward, I wanted to speak, but something told me not to interrupt this moment that was unfolding on its own with a rhythm that did not need me. The girl in front of her was crying, but not with the sharp, desperate kind of sorrow that spills out when everything feels lost. This was the kind of crying that comes when someone finally feels seen, when someone finally feels safe enough to collapse. My daughter held her hands firmly but gently, her thumbs brushing the back of that girl's palms in a slow, grounding way. And the way she whispered to her had a tone I recognized even from where I stood. It was the same tone I used on my daughter during nights when she cried in silence, thinking I did not hear. It was the tone of a woman who says, "You are not alone, you will rise, you are stronger than you believe." Somehow those words flowed from my daughter with a grace I did not know she carried. I felt something shift inside me, something subtle yet powerful. Watching her kneel there showed me a new side of her, a side made of quiet steel and soft understanding, shaped by every moment she had witnessed in our life. She did not hesitate. She did not look around for guidance. She simply acted with instinct and heart, as if life had trained her through experiences neither of us fully recognized until this very moment. And part of me wondered how many times she had observed me holding myself together, how many times she had seen me soothe others, how many times she memorized the language of strength without ever being told it was a lesson. Time stretched in that room in a way that felt almost unreal. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears, yet I could not will myself to make a sound. It felt like stepping into a memory that did not belong to me, yet somehow carried my fingerprints. I watched her shoulders straighten each time the girl before her sobbed harder. I watched her tilt her head in that patient, empathetic way that invites someone to keep going. I watched her breathe slowly with intention, as though she was teaching that girl how to find her own breath again. And with every gesture she made, I felt a swell of emotions rise inside me like a wave I could no longer contain. There was something sacred in witnessing your child step into a version of themselves you never planned for, yet always hoped would emerge. I always imagined I would be the one teaching her how to comfort others, how to stand firm, how to speak life into someone who feels empty. But here she was embodying lessons I never scheduled, lessons I never sat down to explain, lessons she gathered from watching me fight for stability, hope and peace. And now she was channeling that same energy into another young woman who desperately needed to feel anchored. As I watched her, I felt a kind of stillness wash over me. Not the stillness of fear or confusion, but the stillness that comes when you witness a truth that is bigger than you. The truth that children learn who we are far more than they learn what we say. The truth that strength is not passed down through speeches but through presence. The truth that resilience seeps into them through late nights, early mornings, and quiet moments that feel insignificant at the time but shape them deeply without our awareness. I wanted to reach out and touch her shoulder, yet my hand stayed suspended in the air because I realized this moment was not about me. This was her moment, her act of courage, her act of kindness, her transformation unfolding in real time. I watched the girl before her slowly lift her head, eyes red and swollen yet filled with a new kind of clarity, as if my daughter's voice had guided her back to herself. And the pride that welled inside me felt almost too heavy to hold. For a long while I simply stood there, letting the scene etch itself into my spirit, because I knew I was witnessing something I would carry with me forever. It was not just a moment of surprise. It was a revelation of who my daughter was becoming. A revelation that took my breath, swept my fears and replaced them with a deeper understanding of the woman she was already turning into long before I recognized it. When she finally spoke clearly enough for me to hear every word, the sound of her voice carried a weight that made my heart tighten in the deepest place. She did not speak like a child trying to imitate wisdom. She spoke like someone who understood the meaning behind the pain she was witnessing. Her voice was steady and gentle at the same time, steady enough to keep that girl from falling apart and gentle enough to let her know she was safe in the space she had been given. I could hear her say, being a woman does not mean being perfect. It means standing up even when you are shaking. And those words echoed through the room like they had been waiting years for their moment to be spoken aloud. I stood there listening, and it felt like the past opened itself in front of me. Those words were mine, words I had whispered to myself in dark rooms and lonely nights, words I had spoken when my daughter was too young to understand why her mother looked tired yet determined at the same time. I had said them during moments when it felt like the world was trying to break me, and the only way I could hold myself together was by speaking strength into my own spirit. I thought I had said them quietly enough that she would not remember. I thought she had been too young, too distracted, too sheltered to grasp any of it. Yet here she was repeating them with the certainty of someone who believed them fully. Hearing my own words return to me through her voice made my chest feel too full for breath. It is a strange thing to hear the reflections of your own survival spoken by your child. It makes you see how deeply they absorb what you never meant to teach directly. My daughter had watched me walk through storms I tried to shield her from. She had heard pieces of conversations I thought I had hidden behind closed doors. She had seen cracks in my strength that I covered with a smile, hoping to spare her worry. Yet instead of breaking her, those moments shaped her quietly, slowly, patiently, until they turned into something solid inside her. Watching her speak to that girl was like seeing all my unspoken lessons come alive. She did not need notes or guidance or hesitation. She spoke from experience, not because she had lived through the exact same things, but because she had lived close enough to my struggles to understand what resilience looked like. She knew that strength is not loud. Strength is not polished. Strength is not something you perform. Strength is something you build from the pieces of every moment life tried to wear you down. I remembered nights when she would peek down the hallway and see me sitting at the edge of the bed with my hands pressed to my face, trying to gather myself. I remembered mornings when she asked if I was okay and I told her yes, even though my voice wavered. I remembered days when I carried on without explaining the battles I was fighting. I thought she would never understand those moments. Yet here she was, forming wisdom from them, speaking courage as if she had stored every lesson inside her heart, waiting for the right moment to release it. Her voice remained calm as she spoke to that girl. It had a rhythm that reminded me of how I used to hold my daughter when she cried. Slow, steady, almost like a heartbeat guiding someone back to themselves. She told her, you do not have to be perfect. You just have to keep going. You just have to stand even if your legs shake, even if you doubt yourself, even if everything around you feels too heavy. Hearing her say those sentences made something shift inside me. It made me realize how much of my journey had become part of her identity. I saw the girl in front of her lift her head slightly as though those words reached a place no one had touched before. My daughter brushed her thumb gently across the back of the girl's hand, grounding her with a kindness that felt natural, not forced. She carried herself with a maturity that felt surprising yet familiar. It was the kind of maturity that does not come from age. It comes from watching someone you love fight to stay standing. It comes from seeing real strength up close and learning how to mirror it in moments of need. I wanted to step forward and hold both of them, but something about the energy in that room told me to stay still and continue watching. My daughter was learning who she was in that moment, and she was showing me a part of her spirit that had been quietly forming for years. She was not repeating my words just to be comforting. She believed every word she said because she had lived close enough to my struggles to understand the truth behind them. Every breath she took sounded intentional, as if she was guiding herself at the same time she guided the other girl. She spoke slowly with pauses long enough for the words to sink deep. She said things like, "You do not need to hide your hurt. You do not need to pretend you are fine. You just need to remember that you have survived every day before this one." And as she spoke those words, my heart felt like it was folding into itself. Those were the exact sentences I had whispered years ago when life forced me to rebuild pieces of myself I did not even know had cracked. I could feel tears gathering behind my eyes, yet I blinked them away because I did not want to disturb the moment unfolding in front of me. My daughter kept speaking in that steady low voice, and each sentence felt like a thread weaving into the fabric of the girl's fragile spirit. She was helping her breathe again, helping her find her footing, helping her see that her value was not tied to whatever pain she was carrying. Watching her speak like that made me understand something I had never considered. Children hold on to the lessons we unintentionally teach through our actions, through our struggles, through the way we rise after we fall. I never sat my daughter down to teach her how to comfort another person. I never gave her a list of wise sayings to repeat in moments like this. I simply tried to survive while showing her kindness, compassion, and strength whenever I could. And somehow those things grew inside her, shaping her into someone who could stand firm for others. Her words flowed in a soft pattern as though she had rehearsed them, even though I knew she had not. She spoke with the conviction of someone who had seen the truth of resilience through lived experience, not theory. And the more she spoke, the more the girl in front of her began to lift her shoulders just slightly, beginning to breathe in a steadier rhythm. My daughter leaned forward a little more, holding that girl's hands in a secure and gentle way. She whispered, "You are allowed to hurt. You are allowed to break. But do not let that stop you from being who you are meant to be." And hearing those words sent a warmth through me that felt almost overwhelming. She had taken my old lessons and transformed them into her own language, her own understanding, her own form of womanhood. As I continued to listen, the room felt fuller, almost brighter, even though nothing had physically changed. My daughter was doing something powerful, something loving, something deeply rooted in the kind of wisdom that only life can teach. Her voice carried every memory she had stored of my strength. Every night she watched me gather myself, every moment she saw me refuse to give up. And in that moment I realized she was not just repeating what she had learned from me. She was becoming something new, shaped by the lessons she collected quietly through years of observing my journey. She was showing me that she had grown into someone who could offer strength, not just receive it. And as I watched her speak truth into another girl with such grace, I knew this moment would stay with me forever. The longer I watched her, the more I felt the truth settling into me like a slow, deep ache. She was not acting out of impulse. She was not simply repeating words she thought might sound comforting. She was moving with purpose, with intention, with a quiet strength that I had only ever seen in women who had learned to rebuild themselves piece by piece. There was a steadiness in her hands as she held that trembling girl. There was a certainty in her voice that did not waver even for a moment. It was the kind of certainty that does not come from being told what to do. It comes from understanding what someone else needs before they even know how to ask. She leaned closer to the girl, not in a rushed way but in a patient, grounding way. Her presence alone seemed to soften the room. I had spent years trying to teach her about kindness and resilience, often wondering if any of it was sinking in. I taught her about being gentle yet firm, about listening more than speaking, about offering support without losing yourself. But in all that time I never saw what those lessons looked like when they bloomed inside her. Not until that moment, because she was showing me what she had absorbed through every moment she watched me pick myself up. Through every silent night she saw me choosing strength even when I felt shattered. Through every morning she watched me smile while carrying heavy burdens that she never fully knew about. The girl in front of her was breaking openly and without resistance. Her shoulders shuddered, her breath came in uneven waves, her hands trembled as if she had lost all sense of control. My daughter did not flinch. She did not recoil. She did not take a step back the way many people do when someone else is falling apart. Instead she moved closer. She placed her hands more firmly around the girl and breathed in a slow steady rhythm until the girl began to match it. She whispered something soft enough that I could not catch the words, but I could see the effect. The girl's shoulders loosened a little. Her breath evened just slightly. It was a powerful thing to witness. My daughter was not trying to fix her. She was not offering empty reassurances or quick solutions. She was simply anchoring her, holding her present, giving her the space to exist without feeling ashamed of her vulnerability. And that takes a different kind of strength. Not the loud kind, not the proud kind, the kind that understands pain because it has lived close to it. I remembered times when my daughter saw me struggling even though I tried to hide it. I remembered her small hands gently placing a glass of water next to me when she thought I did not notice. I remembered her lingering in doorways watching me breathe slowly, trying to steady myself after a long day. She never asked questions, she never pried, she simply absorbed the energy in the room and mirrored the calm she sensed I needed. That is how children learn. Not through lectures, not through carefully planned lessons, but through quiet observation shaped by love. Watching her now I realized she had learned far more than I understood. She had learned how to be present in the middle of someone else's pain. She had learned how to hold space. She had learned how to be a steady voice when someone else was drowning in their thoughts. I saw her lift her hand and gently brush the tear-streaked hair from the girl's face with a softness that made my chest tighten. She moved with grace, not the kind you see in movies but the kind that grows out of empathy and patience. She said, "You do not have to carry everything alone." And those words seemed to unlock something inside the girl. She let out a long breath that sounded like release, like the moment a storm finally breaks after being held back for too long. My daughter kept speaking in a soft, soothing tone, guiding her through each breath, each moment, each wave of emotion. She told her it is okay to let go. It is okay to be tired. You do not have to be strong every second of every day. And the girl nodded slowly, her tears still falling, but now they carried a different energy. Not desperation, not hopelessness, relief. There was something deeply humbling about witnessing this exchange. My daughter was showing a level of emotional maturity I did not know she possessed. She was stepping into a role I did not assign her. She was responding from a place inside herself that I had only seen glimpses of. It amazed me. It moved me. It made me feel proud in a way that did not fit neatly into words. Because I realized she was not just comforting a friend. She was demonstrating a kind of leadership that cannot be forced or taught through direct instruction. It has to be lived. It has to be felt. It has to grow from experience. Her voice stayed low and constant as she guided the girl through her tears. She told her, "You are allowed to fall apart sometimes. It does not make you weak. It does not make you less." And those words felt like echoes of the things I had whispered to myself in the quiet of my own struggles. Things I never thought she had heard. But she had. She had taken those words and made them her own. She had turned them into something she could offer someone else. And in doing so she was proving that the lessons we pass down are not always intentional, but they are always powerful. The girl began to relax just enough to speak. Her voice cracked as she tried to explain everything she had been holding inside. My daughter listened with complete focus, her eyes locked on the girl's face, her body leaning forward just slightly in a way that said, "I am here. I am listening. You are safe." She did not interrupt. She did not judge. She did not rush her. She allowed the words to come out in jagged, uneven pieces, knowing that sometimes the act of releasing pain is messy and raw. The more the girl spoke, the more I saw my daughter nod with understanding. She offered small, gentle affirmations, not to steer the conversation but to remind the girl she was not alone in it. She stayed grounded even when the girl's voice grew louder or her emotions surged again. My daughter kept her tone steady and calm like a gentle anchor holding someone steady in rising waves. I watched the scene unfold and realized something important. Compassion is not something you perform. It is something you embody. It is something you live. And my daughter was embodying it with every breath she took. She had grown into someone who could handle the weight of another person's emotions without being overwhelmed. She had grown into someone who could speak life into someone who felt broken. She had grown into someone who could be trusted with vulnerability. Her patience never cracked. Her presence never faltered. She stayed right there with that girl through every tear, every confession, every heavy moment. And I realized that this was not a sudden transformation. It was the result of years of watching, learning, absorbing, and understanding what strength truly looks like. Not physical strength, not loud strength, not showy strength, but quiet strength, steady strength, heart strength. She kept speaking softly, offering guidance in a tone that carried warmth and truth. She told the girl, you have worth that no one can take from you. You have a light even if you cannot see it right now. You are allowed to heal at your own pace. And hearing those words felt like listening to a melody I had once hummed but forgotten. A melody she had memorized without me knowing. As the girl's crying softened, my daughter reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. She smiled in a gentle, reassuring way that said, you will be all right even if it does not feel that way right now. That smile held so much love, so much understanding, so much wisdom. It showed me the woman she was becoming and the woman she already was. And I stood there letting it all wash over me, realizing that she had grown into someone who could carry others in their moment of weakness. Someone who could speak healing into broken spaces. Someone who could offer strength without losing her softness. Someone who understood the power of compassion in a world that often teaches us to harden ourselves. Watching her in that moment made me understand something deeper. She did not just learn from my strength. She learned from my vulnerability. She learned from my struggles. She learned from the moments when I thought I had failed, but she saw something else entirely. She saw endurance. She saw courage. She saw the truth of womanhood not in perfection but in perseverance. And now she was passing that truth on. With her voice, her hands, her presence, her heart. As I stood there watching them, the scene began to unfold in a way that pulled every memory, every lesson, and every buried feeling up to the surface. I had walked into that room expecting nothing unusual, yet what I found was a moment that revealed the truth of who my daughter was becoming. She lifted her head slightly as the girl finished speaking, and for a brief moment she was silent, not because she did not know what to say but because she understood that healing requires breath and space and stillness. She took in everything the girl had confessed with a kind of maturity that did not belong to a child. I could almost see her sorting through years of unspoken lessons, years of watching me navigate life, years of absorbing strength secondhand through the cracks of my own struggle. Then she spoke again, and this time her voice carried an almost echoing calmness, the kind that settles into a room and makes every corner feel softer. She told the girl, sometimes life feels like it is trying to break you, but every woman who has ever stood tall had days where she felt like falling apart. She said it with a strength that did not waver and with a gentleness that could steady even the most fragile heart. I could feel those words moving through the room like warm air, touching everything that felt cold. The girl let out a shaky breath, and my daughter placed her hand on her shoulder in a reassuring way. Not forceful, not hesitant, but confident and steady. A grounding touch. I saw her thumb move in slow circles, offering comfort, the same kind of comfort I used to give her when she cried as a child. I had no idea she remembered that small motion all these years. I had no idea she would use it on someone else. But there she was with the same instinct I once used on her, now fully blossomed inside her. Then something inside her shifted. I could almost see it. She drew in a slow breath and settled her posture like she was preparing to reveal something deeply shaped by her own life. And she began to tell the girl a story, not in a formal way, not in a dramatic way, but in a soft, honest flow. She told her about times when she herself felt lost or heavy or unsure, even though she had never spoken those moments to me. I realized she had her own private struggles, moments where she tried to appear strong so I would not worry. She told the girl how she learned to stand even when her knees felt weak, and how she learned to trust herself even when doubt felt louder than truth. Listening to her speak like that felt like witnessing a part of her heart I had never seen before. It felt like seeing the internal map of her experiences laid out through her words. And as she spoke, the girl started to breathe more steadily, as if my daughter's story was a hand reaching out into her darkness, pulling her gently toward light. It amazed me how naturally my daughter offered herself so fully to help someone else rise. She said, "You are learning how to be a woman, and that does not mean knowing everything or being strong all the time. It means growing through days like this. It means feeling deeply even when it hurts. It means finding your worth in places where others might try to dim it." Those words were rooted in her spirit, not borrowed or rehearsed, but shaped through every moment she learned what strength meant by watching me live it. The girl looked at her with wide eyes, a mixture of pain, hope, confusion, and longing, all tangled together, and my daughter did not blink or look away. She held her gaze with steady warmth, and I knew in that instant she understood something that takes many people years to grasp. She understood that presence is sometimes more important than advice. She understood that listening with your heart is more powerful than trying to solve everything. She understood that healing does not come from perfection but from connection. She leaned in slightly and continued speaking, guiding the girl with soft truths that sounded like they had been carved into her by life itself. She said, "Every woman carries a story inside her, a story that shapes who she becomes, and you are learning yours. Do not be ashamed of the chapters that hurt. They are the same chapters that will one day give you the strength to help someone else." Those words struck me tenderly because she had just spoken my own life without even knowing it. Every painful part of my story had shaped me into the mother she needed, and now those silent lessons were shaping her into the woman she was becoming. The girl began to cry again, but it was not the same kind of crying from earlier. It was softer, less frantic, almost like her tears were releasing old pain instead of fueling new fear. My daughter reached out and wiped them gently, without flinching, without rushing, without making her feel like her tears were too much. She held that girl's face with both hands and said, "Look at me. You are going to be okay. Not because everything will suddenly be perfect, but because you will learn how to rise." The way she spoke those words made me feel like I had entered a sacred moment between two souls who were building strength together. Then my daughter shifted again, her voice becoming firmer, not harsh, not loud, but filled with a confident truth. She told the girl, "Do not let anyone define your worth. People will try. They will judge. They will misunderstand. They will expect things from you that you cannot give. But none of that is your truth. You get to decide who you become. You get to choose how your story continues." And I felt myself inhale sharply because I knew exactly where that belief came from. She had watched me stand up again and again after life tried to tear me down. She had seen me walk away from people who did not value me. She had watched me build myself without applause, without support, without certainty. And somehow all of that had taught her how to speak life into someone else. The girl nodded slowly, tears still sliding down her face, but her breathing calmer, her posture softer. My daughter squeezed her hands and said, "You are not alone. I am right here." And it was in that moment I realized that my daughter had taken every piece of strength she learned from me and blended it with the softness she was born with, creating a new kind of womanhood that was entirely her own. She was not mimicking me. She was evolving from me. She had taken everything I poured into her and turned it into something powerful, something compassionate, something full of purpose. She stayed with the girl as the silence settled between them. Not an uncomfortable silence, but a healing one. A silence that felt like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. She continued to hold her hands and breathe with her, matching her energy, guiding her back to a place of calm. And as I watched them, I felt something heavy inside me lift. Because I finally understood that my daughter had not only learned from me. She had grown beyond anything I imagined. She was becoming a woman who could steady others and still stay rooted in herself. A woman who could hold pain without being overtaken by it. A woman who could speak wisdom from a place that felt ancient and new at the same time. I realized then that strength is generational, but not in the way people think. It does not pass down through words. It passes down through presence, through resilience, through the quiet moments where children watch us rise. My daughter had seen me in moments of weakness and moments of triumph, and she had gathered all of it and woven it into her own identity. And now she was offering that woven strength to someone else who desperately needed to feel seen. Watching her in that moment made me understand that she was not simply learning how to be a woman. She was teaching it. She was shaping her own definition of womanhood built from compassion, empathy, courage, and steady grace. And it stunned me. It moved me. It changed something inside me. I remember standing there in the middle of that quiet room feeling a kind of stillness that did not belong to any home that ever held love or laughter. My daughter sat there with her shoulders pulled in tight like she was afraid of her own shadow, and the young boy who sat across from her looked like he had been dropped into a world he had never meant to enter. I could feel something swelling inside me, something like heartbreak mixed with a very old kind of wisdom that whispers to you when you have lived long enough to see mistakes being built long before they fall. I walked toward them slow and steady, not with anger because anger can be loud, but I wanted to be clear and steady so that every word I said would sink into the place where truth finally grows. She lifted her face and her eyes were wet and scared and confused, like she had carried a weight far too heavy for her young soul. I reached for her hand and she let me take it, and I could feel the tremble running through her small fingers. I wanted to wrap her up in my arms right there, but first I needed her to understand something deeper than fear, deeper than shame, deeper than the moment that had left her feeling exposed and lost. I told her that young people often mistake curiosity for maturity, and they mistake pressure for connection. I told her that the world pushes and pulls and twists your sense of yourself until you start believing you must perform some version of adulthood long before your heart is ready. Sometimes young people become teachers of things they have never learned themselves. They imitate, they guess, they try to act bold because being bold feels like the only way to avoid being mocked or misunderstood. But the truth is that boldness without understanding is just another form of fear. I told her that when someone tries to learn how to act grown without actually being grown, they end up carving wounds inside themselves without even knowing it. She held onto my hand tighter when I said that, and I could tell she wanted me to keep talking because silence right then felt like punishment. So I told her that the body is not a tool for validation and it is not a ticket for acceptance. It is a sacred thing and it deserves protection and respect and tenderness and thought. Growing up in a world full of noise can make you think you need to rush through the stages of life just to catch up with people who are pretending to be ahead of you. But growing up is not a race. It is not a competition. It is not something you prove by acting out scenes you do not understand. It is a long, steady journey where each step teaches you something that helps you stand a little taller the next time life shakes you. She leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered that she did not want to disappoint me. Her voice cracked in the middle like something inside her had been waiting for a moment to break open. I placed my hand on her back and told her that disappointment is not what I felt. What I felt was concern and love and a fierce need to guide her before she walked too far into a world that would happily swallow her innocence whole. I told her that she can always come to me with questions and fears and confusion because secrecy is what leads young hearts into dangerous places. She said she thought she had to figure it out alone because everyone her age seemed to already know everything. I smiled soft at that because every parent knows that children often mistake bold talk for real knowledge. People pretend. People brag, people exaggerate, and young people hear those stories and think they must keep up or be left behind. But most of those stories are not real. They are stitched together from insecurity and bravado. I lifted her chin gently and told her that real womanhood is not learned in a rush. Real womanhood is learned through strength and patience and moments where you choose respect for yourself even when nobody else is choosing it. I wanted her to understand that nothing about intimacy or affection or connection should ever begin in fear or confusion or obligation. It should come when the heart is steady and the mind is clear and the soul feels safe. I wanted her to understand that her worth is not proven through acts or gestures but through the way she carries herself and the way she honors her own boundaries. The boy sat there still quiet, still unsure, still trying to figure out how he had ended up in the middle of this moment. I looked at him and saw that he was just as lost as she was. So I told him that he had a responsibility too. I told him that if he cared about her in any real way he would never let her do something that made her feel unsafe, confused or pressured. I told him that real care means stepping back when the moment feels wrong and speaking up when the situation is bigger than the two young hearts trying to handle it. He nodded and his face softened, and I hoped that some part of what I said would echo inside him long after he left. Then I turned back to my daughter and told her something I needed her to keep for the rest of her life. I told her that when you do not understand your own value, you begin offering pieces of yourself to people who never earned them. You begin mistaking vulnerability for connection. You begin thinking that being chosen matters more than choosing wisely. I told her that the world is full of people who will happily take from you if you do not learn how to protect the parts of yourself that deserve to be guarded. And guarding yourself is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is strength. It is dignity. She cried deeper then, but the kind of cry that washes you clean. I held her and let her cry because sometimes the heart needs to spill before it can steady itself again. I told her that she was not ruined. She was not broken. She was not bad. She was simply young and learning and stumbling like every generation before her. I told her that her innocence was not lost, just shaken. And it could be rebuilt through honesty, patience and love. I told her that what mattered most was that she listened now so she would not have to heal later from wounds that were avoidable. I pulled her close and whispered that I am her mother and nothing she does will ever make me stop protecting her, guiding her or fighting for her. I told her that mistakes do not define her. Choices do. And she still had the power to choose differently. She still had the power to step back and learn. She still had the power to wait until her heart and mind were ready for the parts of life that should only be approached with clarity and respect. Then I asked her to breathe. Just breathe. Slow, steady, gentle breaths. I wanted her to feel her own heartbeat and remember that she is still whole, still loved, still worthy. And as she breathed, something in her posture changed. She sat a little straighter. Her eyes softened. Her shoulders loosened. She looked like someone who had just realized she did not need to pretend to be older than she was. She just needed to be honest about where she stood in life and allow herself to grow without rushing. I told both of them that what mattered now was understanding. Not guilt. Not shame. Not anger. Understanding. Because without understanding we repeat mistakes. We trip over the same stones again and again. But when we understand, we rise differently. We walk differently. We choose differently. And in that quiet room with the afternoon light slipping across the floor, I watched my daughter take in every word like she was finally ready to let herself be guided. And that was the first real step toward healing, toward growth, toward the kind of womanhood that does not need to be taught in secret shadows but learned in the light with wisdom and patience and love. When the house finally settled into silence and the sun dipped low enough to paint the windows in that soft orange glow, I felt something heavy ease inside my chest, like a knot I had been carrying for too long was finally beginning to soften. My daughter sat beside me, not talking, just breathing the way someone breathes after a long storm. Her hands were folded in her lap, small, unsure, trembling in a way only a young heart can tremble after being confronted with more truth than it expected. I reached over and let my fingers rest on her arm, feeling the warmth of her skin and the fragile steadiness returning little by little. Moments like that remind a mother of something sacred. No matter how shaken a child becomes, there is always a part of them that wants to run back into the safety of someone who knows them better than the world does. I told her that what happened that day was not an ending. It was a beginning of honesty, a beginning of boundaries, a beginning of her learning how to recognize the difference between curiosity and readiness. She looked at me with those wide young eyes, still full of uncertainty, and I could see she wanted to believe me but did not quite know how. So I kept my voice calm and steady, letting each word fall gently like soft drops on dry ground. I told her that every young person reaches a crossroads where they must decide whether to follow the noise of the world or the guidance of their own growing wisdom. The noise is louder and easier and tempting. Wisdom is quieter. You must lean in close to hear it. But the quiet path is the one that protects you. She asked me in a small, trembling voice if I was ashamed of her. That question pierced me deeper than anything else could have, because it told me she had been carrying fear that went far beyond the moment I walked in earlier. I slid closer and wrapped my arm around her shoulders, pulling her against me so she could feel the steadiness in my heartbeat. I told her that shame has no home in a family built on truth and love. I told her that what I felt was not shame. What I felt was a fierce urge to shield her from harm, from confusion, from rushing down a road she did not understand. I told her she was not tarnished. She was not ruined. She was simply learning, and learning sometimes happens in messy, ungraceful ways. She leaned her head on my shoulder and her whole body relaxed into me like she had been waiting all day for permission to fall apart safely. I held her as she cried quiet tears, the kind that do not come from pain alone but from relief. Relief that someone had finally lifted the burden of silence she had been carrying. I stroked her hair and reminded her that she will never have to pretend with me. She will never have to hide her fears or her mistakes or her questions, because I would always rather guide her through the truth than comfort her in a lie. After a while she asked why young people always feel like they have to grow faster than they are ready. I told her that the world paints a picture of adulthood like it is a race, like whoever crosses the line first wins something valuable. But adulthood is not a finish line. It is a responsibility, and responsibility is not something you chase. It is something you prepare for slowly, carefully, thoughtfully. When you take it too early you stumble. When you take it with understanding you walk with confidence. She listened quietly, absorbing those words like medicine she did not know she needed. I told her that real maturity is not shown in stolen moments or rushed choices. Real maturity is shown in the courage to wait. The courage to say no when something feels wrong. The courage to speak up and step back even when someone else says it is normal to rush. Real maturity is choosing yourself, your safety, your dignity, even when the world tells you that you are being dramatic or slow or childish. Her breathing slowed and she asked me if I ever made mistakes when I was her age. I laughed softly, because every mother has stories she keeps tucked away. I told her that yes, I stumbled too. I walked into moments believing I was ready, only to discover that I was not. But I survived because I learned. And I wanted her to learn without having to carry the same kind of scars. She reached up and wiped her face, then whispered that she never wanted to disappoint me again. I told her disappointment is not the enemy. Silence is. Hiding is. Pretending is. As long as she talks to me, as long as she keeps her heart open, she will never lose her way, because I will always walk beside her. A long quiet filled the room then, and it felt peaceful, not tense like earlier. She told me she felt lighter. I nodded, because understanding always lightens a heart. Confusion is heavy. Secrets are heavier. But truth lifts. Truth clears space inside you so you can breathe again. I asked her what she learned from everything that happened. She thought for a long moment, then said she learned that she does not have to prove anything to anyone. She learned that she wants to protect herself, not perform for someone else. She learned that growing up does not mean giving away pieces of herself she does not understand. Her voice was steadier than it had been all day, and I felt pride swell inside me. Quiet pride, the kind that warms rather than burns. I told her that this moment will not define her. What will define her is how she moves forward. She promised she would be more careful, more thoughtful, more honest with herself. I looked into her eyes and told her that was all I ever wanted. Not perfection, not fear, just awareness and self-respect. I told her that real strength is not loud or showy. Real strength is knowing you can say no. Real strength is knowing you can walk away. Real strength is choosing your future self instead of your present impulse. She asked if the boy was in trouble. I told her no, he was not a villain. He was simply another young person trying to understand things too big for him. I told her that both of them were drifting without guidance, and sometimes that leads to moments that look darker than they are. What mattered was that now they understood. Now they could make better choices. Now they could walk away without resentment or shame. As the evening deepened, I made her tea and we sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket the way we did when she was small. She told me she felt safe. I told her she always will, as long as she trusts me enough to come home emotionally, not just physically. A mother cannot shield her child from every mistake, but she can make sure the lesson comes with softness instead of destruction. When she finally went to bed, she hugged me tighter than she had hugged me in years. A hug that said thank you and I am sorry and I understand all in one. I held her close and whispered that she is growing and learning and becoming, and that I will be right beside her through every phase, every choice, every stumble. After the house went still, I sat alone in the living room thinking about how close she had come to a path that could have chipped away at her. But instead she chose to listen. She chose to grow, and that choice will matter for the rest of her life. I felt gratitude rise in me, not for the situation but for the chance to turn it into wisdom. I realized then that this is what motherhood truly is. Not just feeding and clothing and teaching. It is standing between your child and the cliff they cannot see yet. It is speaking truth into their confusion. It is guiding them back from the edge with patience instead of punishment. It is loving them so fiercely that even their mistakes become opportunities for connection, not separation. And as the night wrapped around the house, I whispered a quiet promise to myself. I would keep guiding her. I would keep teaching her what real womanhood looks like. I would keep showing her that she does not have to rush. She does not have to perform. She does not have to give away pieces of herself to feel worthy. She only has to understand her value and protect it. Because that is the kind of woman I want her to become. Not rushed, not pressured, not confused, but strong, wise, whole, and unshakably grounded in her own worth.